and were lost to sight. To their left, almost too close for comfort, was the stupendous cataract, towering above them to a terror-inspiring height. Nadia studied it with awe, which changed to puzzled wonder. "What's the matter with it, Steve? It looks like a picture in slow motion, like the kind they take of your dives. Or am I seeing things?" "No, it's really slow, compared to what we're used to. Remember that one-half gravity stuff?" "Oh, that's right. But it certainly does look funny. It gives me the creeps." "You'll get used to it pretty quick, just as you'll get used to all the rest of the things having only half their earthly weight and falling only half as fast as they ought to when you drop them. Well, I don't see anything that looks dangerous yet. Let's go up toward the falls a few meters and prospect that outcrop." With a few brisk strokes of an improvised shovel, he cleared the outcrop of detritus and broke off several samples of the black substance, with which they went back to the Forlorn Hope. "It's real coal," Stevens announced, after a series of tests. "I've seen better, but on the other hand, there's lots worse. It'll make good gas, and a kind of a coke. Not so hot, but it'll do. Now we'd better get organized, old partner, for a long campaign." "Go ahead and organize. I'm only the cheap help in this enterprise." "Cheap help? You're apt to be the life of the party. Can you make and shoot a bow and arrow?" "I'll say I can. I've belonged to an archery club for 5 years." "What did I tell you? You're a lifesaver. Here's the dope. We've got to save our own supplies as much as possible until we know exactly what we're up against, and to do that, we've got to live off the country. I'll fake up something to knock over some of those birds and small game. Then we can make real bowstrings and feathered arrows, and I'll forge some steel arrowheads while you're making yourself a real bow. We'd better make me about 100-pound war bow, too." "100?" interrupted Nadia. "That's a lot of bow, big boy. Think you can bend it?" "You'd be surprised," he grinned. "I'm not quite like Robin Hood. I've been known to miss a finger-thick wand at 100 paces, but I'm not exactly a beginner." "Oh, of course. I should have known by your language that you're an archer. Otherwise, you'd never have used such an old-fashioned word as pounds. I shoot a 35-pound bow ordinarily, but for game I should have the heaviest one I can hold accurately, about a 45 probably." "All X. And as soon as I can, I'll make us a couple of suits of fairly heavy steel armor, so that we'll have real protection if we should need it. You see, we don't know what we're apt to run up against out here. Then, with that much done, it'll be up to you to provide, since I'll have to work tooth and nail at the forges. You'll have to bring home the bacon, do the cooking and so on, and see what you can find along the line of edible roots, grains, fruits, and whatnot. Sort of reverse the Indian idea. You be the hunter, and I'll keep the home fires burning. Can do?" "What it takes to do that, I've got," Nadia assured him, her eyes sparkling. "Have you your job planned out as well and as fittingly as you have mine?" "And then some. We've got just 2 methods of getting away from here. One is to get in touch with Brandon, so that he'll come after us. The other is to recharge our accumulators and try to make it under our own power. Either course will need power, and lots of it." "I never thought of going back in the Hope. Suppose we could?" "About as doubtful as the radio. I think that I could build a pair of matched-frequency auto-dirigible transmitter and receptor units, such as are necessary for spaceships fed by stationary power plants, but after I got them built, they'd take us less than halfway there. Then we'd have only what power we can carry, and I hate even to think of what probably would happen to us. We'd certainly have to drift for months before we could get close enough to any of our plants to radio for help, and we'd be taking awful chances. You see, we'd have to take a very peculiar orbit, and if we should miss connections passing the inner planets, what the sun would do to us at the closest point, and where what's left of us would go on the backswing, would be just too bad. Besides, if we can get hold of the Sirius, they'll come loaded for bear, and we may be able to do something about the rest of the folks out there."
"Oh," breathed the girl, "wouldn't it be wonderful if we could? I thought, of course, they'd all be—"
Her voice died away. "Not necessarily. There's always a chance. That's why I'm trying the ultra-radio first. However, either course will take lots of power, so the first thing I've got to do is build a power plant. I'm going to run a penstock up those falls and put in a turbine, driving a high-tension alternator. Then, while I'm trying to build the ultra-radio, I'll be charging our accumulators so that no time will be lost in case the radio fails. If it does fail, and remember, I'm not counting on its working, of course, I'll tackle the transmission and receptor units before we start out to drift it."
"You say it easy, Steve, but how can you build all those things with nothing to work with?"
"It's going to be a real job. I'm not trying to kid you into thinking it'll be either easy or quick. Here's the way everything will go. Before I can even lay the first length of the penstock, I've got to have the pipe, to make which I've got to have flat steel, to get which I'll have to cut some of the partitions out of this ship of ours, to do which I'll have to have a cutting torch, to make which I'll have to forge nozzles out of block metal, and to run which I'll have to have gas, to get which I'll have to have mine coal and build a gas plant, to do which—"
"Good heavens, Steve, are you going back to the Stone Age? I never thought of half those things. Why, it's impossible."
"Not quite, Guy. Things could be a lot worse. That's why I brought along the whole Forlorn Hope, instead of just the lifeboat. As it is, we've got several thousand tons of spare steel and lots of copper. We've got ordinary tools and a few light motors, blowers, and such stuff. That gives me a great big start. I won't have to mine the ores and smelt the metals, as would have been necessary otherwise. However, it'll be plenty bad. I'll have to start out in a pretty crude fashion, and for some of the stuff I'll need, I'll have to make not only the machine that makes the part I want, but also the machine that makes the machine that makes the machine that makes it, and so on. Just how far down the line, I haven't dared to think."
"You must be a regular jack-of-all-trades to think you can get away with such a program as that."
"I am. Nothing else but. You see, while most of my school training was in advanced physics and mathematics, I worked my way through by computing and designing, and I've done a lot of truck horse labor of various kinds besides. I can calculate and design almost anything, and I can make a pretty good stab at translating a design into fabricated material. I wouldn't wonder if Brandon's ultra-radio would stop me, since nobody had even started to build one when I saw him last, but I helped compute it, know the forces involved as well as he did at that time, and it so happens that I know more about the design of coils and fields of force than I do about anything else. So I may be able to work it out eventually. It isn't going to be not knowing how that will hold me up, it'll be the lack of something that I can't build."
"And that's where you will go back and back and back, as you said about building the penstock."
"Back and back is right, if I can find all the necessary raw materials. That's what's probably going to put a lot of monkey wrenches into the machinery." And Stevens went to work upon a weapon of offense, fashioning a crude but powerful bow from a strip of spring steel strung with heavy wire.
"How about arrows? Shall I go and see if I can hit a bird with a rock for feathers, and see if I can find something to make arrows out of?"
"Not yet. Anyway, I'd bet on the birds. I'm going to use pieces of this light brace rod off the accumulator cells for arrows. They won't fly true, of course, but with their mass, I can give them enough projectile force to kill any small animal they hit, no matter how they hit it." After many misses, he finally bagged a small animal, something like a rabbit and something like a kangaroo, and a couple of round-bodied, plump birds, almost as large as domestic hens. These they dressed, with considerable distaste and a noticeable lack of skill. "We'll get used to it pretty quick, Diana, also more expert," he said when the task was done. We now have raw material for bowstrings and clothes, as well as food.